my pet project in the NFL is pointing out these sort of little administrative moments. And so we're going from kind of like big to medium to small on terms of the emergency scale. Okay. We have an embattled head coach that just switched quarterbacks. That's big. Okay. Now we have medium, which is that we have an embattled head coach that on Sunday after the game was asked about relinquishing play calling. And that's always step one. You have to be asked about it first. It has to be bad enough that you're asked about it. Then step two is probably walking into some owner in the hallway and then being like, hey, why don't you think about giving up play calling? Which means you should give up play calling. And step two is actually giving up play calling. That's where we're at with Brian Callahan in Tennessee. And Albert, I think this makes all the sense in the world. But I want to ask something, okay? So, and this is partially a defense of someone who I thought got railroaded on a job and whatever. But 2 weeks into Nathaniel Hackett's tenure in Denver, the panic over game mismanagement, importing a game management guy for him after, and clearly a lot of this were just issues with Russell that we can now see, right?
Yeah.
With Callahan, there seems to be more of like okay, he just needs to give up play calling and now he can manage these games. In a couple weeks, in 3 weeks, he's exhibited blatant game mismanagement, not knowing the rules on stuff and doubling down on it. And where's the panic over this guy to the point where, okay, now he's giving up play calling and we'll see if the game management improves. But it to me, is a difference between a major market and a small market where this isn't even a pitchforks and torches moment for him
Yeah.
yet.
Yeah. I mean, and I think it was also like the spotlight that having Russell there in
Yeah.
Denver put on everything. I
Yeah.
mean, Denver going into that year was like, I remember like the feeling was like they're actually really close in a lot of different areas. And if you just plug the quarterback and the coach in, then everything's going to be fixed. And maybe they
Yeah.
weren't that close. And, we saw like when Sean Payton got there, how he started offloading guys, you know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like, which was, the Bradley Chubbs, the Jerry Judys, like it was almost like a, no, you weren't that close and I can see it. And I'm going to rebuild this thing now. And, obviously, Sean did a good job of retooling that roster on the fly with George Payton. But, I think that that's the difference is that like there was this perception going into that year that the Broncos were right on the doorstep and that Hackett and Wilson were going to make the difference and turn them into a very real contender. And it didn't happen. Whereas like in this situation, this organization has been a dumpster fire for the last 2 or 3 years. They fired John Robinson. They fired Mike Vrabel. They fired John Robinson's replacement, Rand Carthon. They elevated his number 2 to be the boss of the whole thing, and Chad Brinker. They had a new coach 2 off seasons ago. They have a new general manager this year. I mean, that amount of change in like 4 years is mind blowing,
It is.
So like, I do think that there's the macro and the micro of this. The micro is what you're talking about, which is the team's bad and they know it. And now there's game mismanagement issues. So I think people extrapolate that and say, well, like if is mismanagement that we can see on TV, there must be mismanagement everywhere else, Is that necessarily the case? I don't know. But like, I do think that there's that element of it. Again, with the perspective that this was not seen as a team that was on the doorstep the way the Broncos were, which I think is why it's the market 100%. Denver is if the Broncos aren't a flagship franchise, they're right after teams like the Steelers and the Giants,
Yeah.
and the Cowboys, right? But, and the Titans just aren't that. So that's part of it. But I think the other part of it is no one was under the illusion that the Titans were close to anything.
Well, I think they're close to something
They might
the
be
other
close
way
to something.
at this
They might
point.
be closer to something now. Yeah.
and I respect the difficulty of the job that Callahan walked into and the threadbare nature of the roster. I mean, Rand Carthon was not setting anybody up for success the way that they ran that thing. And I think it was going back to last year. I would say like adding Pollard and adding Ridley and trying to very quickly
Like
slap
microwave it.
slap over this thing with Spackle was so dangerous. And you're seeing, and God, it's frustrating to me that I have to say nice things at this point, but like you're seeing how quickly 2 or 3 late first or early second round picks, whether it's Atlanta on the defensive side of the ball, whether it's Cleveland on the defensive side of the ball, and some of their offensive players too, that can be an absolute game changer. And in the absence of cynical, tired, banged up vets who want the ball and are, overworking this poor
Right.
kid who is just Cam Ward is doing spectacular things on the field, but because he has to.
Right.
And I really
And
don't think that he needs to pull on the Superman vest
mhm.
every week, but maybe the change in play caller will help and will dissuade him from doing that. I don't
I
know.
mean, I look at it too, like, you know how many rookies they're playing on offense? Like their second, third, and fifth leading receiver in week 3 were rookies. It's Iomanor and DK, the 2 receivers they
Yeah,
took, and then Gunnar Helm, the tight end they took.
right.
Those guys combined for for 9 catches, which is a lot. When your quarterback only completes 23 balls. So look, I mean, those guys were more active in the passing game than Tony Pollard, than Van Jefferson, than Calvin Ridley. And so like that's the other piece of it is like I think there's the do we sink or swim with the young guys? Is it more valuable for us to get those young guys reps rather than just try to establish credibility with older guys who aren't going to be on the team in a year?
Right.
And I think they've sort of taken, I'd assume part of this is coming from the front office, right? Like, which is like, a bunch of new guys there where it's like, let's ride the younger guys and let's see what they can become, and generally you'll see teams do that later in the year when they fall out of contention, but the Titans are clearly doing that right from the start.
It's interesting that he went to the QB coach as the play caller and left the
Yeah, I
OC
thought that was interesting too.
installed as the OC. And I don't think it's a bad thing. I think it's an acknowledgement that everybody here
Mm-hmm.
is overloaded. Everybody here needs to take a step back. Everybody needs to rethink it, because if you look at it, and maybe this is something that could potentially be
I wonder how much that's.
innovative.
I wonder if that's part of its optics too. I mean, do you know who his offensive coordinator is?
The offensive coordinator is Nick Holes, and
Nick
then
Holtz, who's like his high school buddy, right? Like now,
okay.
Nick's got a good resume, but I do wonder if there's part of that that's about optics too, which is like I either get like how's that going to look if I like just hand it to the guy
Mm,
that I gave an opportunity to, who wasn't necessarily on other teams' radars as an offensive coordinator,
okay.
versus a guy who actually has called plays before in Bo
Yeah.
Hardegree. So I do think that there's like an element of optics to that part of it also, although it does seem weird, right? Like, because generally what you would do in that situation, you're the head coach, the play caller, you got a non-play calling offensive coordinator, give it to the coordinator.
Do you remember, this makes me think of, and I'm not saying that Nick Holtz is this person, but when Jeff Saturday came and I can say this with confidence. I know you can too, that there were guys who turned down play calling duties when when Jeff Saturday was like, "All right, who wants to do this?" And everyone was just like, and then they all put their finger on their nose, like, "Not it, not it, not it, not it."
But you can sort of like understand that because it's like, do I think this is a winning situation? You know what I
No,
mean? Like, or do I want my only experience as a play caller to potentially look really bad?
yeah,
There's definitely like a big picture, like career consideration there, for sure.
I would do it. I've been calling plays on Madden for God, 20
I mean,
years now.
it took Parks Frazier, who I think was seen as like a rising young guy. And where's he at now? I mean, it like really, like, I think like a guy who was ascending under,
Frank Reich,
under Frank Reich and had been kind of like the right hand man of Frank Reich. He's now,
passing game
now he's with the
coordinator in
Eagles,
Philly.
which he's the pass game coordinator in Philly. So he took Kevin Patullo's old role. But last year, He was basically a quality control guy in Miami. So
Um, this is a tough. It's a tough situation, and you have the eternal coach weighing thing where, like, when a really bad job opens, there
yeah.
are a couple coaches who are like good firefighters and run into burning buildings because they want to be the one to put it out. And there are the other coaches who I think are a little bit more cynical and are like, okay, that's not good for me at all. And I don't want any part of that. That said, I do think there's two things.
Mm-hmm.
I think one, it is interesting to me, the idea of having a quarterbacks coach become a play caller more regularly if this works out. He's
Right.
theoretically the guy who spends the most time with that person at the position
Right.
and is most aware of his unique likes and dislikes and preferences. And as you put together that call sheet, if you're the offensive coordinator, maybe you can spend a little bit more time with your
So
offensive
then we're
line.
talking about like a co-coordinator situation, though,
Yeah,
right? I mean, for the
which is
most part.
which a lot of the Shanahan guys have done for years, right? Which is
Right.
more of your run game,
Well,
pass game.
I mean, there's more of that exists that people realize. Like the end of Jim Harbaugh obviously did a lot right in San Francisco, but I remember like at the end in San Francisco, they had like four different guys calling plays. It was like Greg Roman was calling the run plays, Johnny Morton was calling the pass plays. They had like another guy who was calling third down, and then Jim would just kind of swoop in whenever he wanted to. And like but that sort of thing is more common than you think. And so it's, I think it can be destructive if it's not organized correctly, you know? And Jim, to his credit, I think really learned from that experience, because that was the very end in San Francisco when things weren't good between him and ownership and everything else. But, I would say like the thing, like there's a flow to calling plays, right? And there's like, you use the West Coast term, there's a marriage between the run game and the pass game. And there's a element of setting things up, and coming back to them later in the game if you lose, or you are at risk of losing if you have more than one person doing it. So I think your point's well taken, Connor, but I think there are elements where you really do have to be careful, with how many people are involved.
Too many cooks. The third level of this, which I love, right, is, and this is sort of, so we have benching your quarterback, we have surrendering play calls, and then we have the micro. So this is like planting the little seed of chaos into the soil, is having Zach Robinson move from the booth in Atlanta down to the sideline. I want to defend Zach, and I think I'm a little bit out on an island with this. Certainly, I've been reading kind of what the true tape dogs say, and with all deference and respect to them, they can see the game at a different level than I can. Dan Orlovsky was one who immediately came out and said, like, Michael Penix needs help. And again, he played quarterback in the NFL.
Yep.
I went back and I watched that Carolina game, and I just kept rewatching all the dropbacks for Penix, and I think it was a potpourri of stuff. Like, I think that there were a lot of moments where he's just not pulling the trigger, And I looked at stuff where it was like, okay, here's your 3-step, your 5-step, whatever, your drop. Here's where your plant foot goes in. And I like to pause it and say, okay, do I see an answer here? Do I see something
Yeah.
where a guy is open, and where your head should be on the same side of the field, where you can let it rip and there's someone there? And a lot of
Yep.
times I think that the answer is yes. I think that Zach Robinson is doing okay. And so I don't know if this is a Penix problem. I don't know if this is a Robinson problem. I think that maybe at least moving him down to the field gives him a chance to just have a more intimate in-game relationship with his quarterback, and to take it off the headset.
Right.
But
Well,
I
then they
don't know
fired the
what this
receiver
is.
coach too.
Right.
So, I mean,
And
that's
that, I think, Albert, was the bigger issue, where you would look and you would see double routes down the field. You would see guys getting jammed at the line and getting thrown off their trajectory on their routes. That makes more sense to me.
right. So, like now, I believe TJ Yates is moving over to coach the receivers. Is that right?
Yes.
So maybe now you got a guy who can see it through the quarterback's eyes a little bit better, and it's going to help, like marry together what the receivers are doing to what the quarterback is seeing. Do you worry this feels reactionary?
Yes, 100%.
Because like they just got shut out by the Panthers and Penix threw a pick six. And I don't know, like that'd be my one concern, because it's not like the offense was like just dead on arrival last week. They ran for 131 yards. Bijan Robinson still looks like one of the very best players in all of football. You need to get more out of the receiver spot. Like I think sometimes I love Raheem as a head coach. He should have been a head coach way before this. I think he'll do a good job over time. In Atlanta, like my one question would be is like, when you're in this leadership position and you come off of that horrible performance and now you start pushing buttons, does it like take that optic to another level where the guys already know they got their ass kicked? And now it's like, you're sort of confirming like, oh yeah, like this is no good. You know what I mean?
And it's been really the story.
I just think it's to do that, like it has to actually be really bad. You know what I mean?
It's been the story of his tenure so far, right? Where it's like, okay, well, we had a really bad defense and we didn't generate a lot of pressure. So even though I'm a defensive head coach and got the job because of my defensive acumen, and I was a brilliant defensive play caller in LA, I'm going to fire the defensive coordinator and bring in Jeff Ulbrich, which was an upgrade. There's no doubt about it. If you have the chance to get someone like Jeff and some of the position coaches that Jeff brings with him, you do it. Okay. But then there's another side to this, I think.
Yeah, and I think that was part of that too was like maybe Ulbrich was more capable of calling it, and like so that gave Raheem a little bit more freedom to be the head coach, whereas maybe he didn't have that freedom as much last year.
But when that keeps happening, I think that there's no doubt. I mean, Albert, you've been working as a grown man for 20 plus years in the world. Thanks. I mean, I don't know what
you don't know what that feels like to have 20 years plus under your belt.
My hair's a little less. No, my hair's probably actually I have more grays than you. But you just can't see them because I shave them all off. But
I've never dyed anything, by the way, just so you know.
Good for you.
Yeah. This is like one of the gifts my parents gave me. My dad still got dark hair in his 70s. My mom still got dark hair in her 80s. So,
wow,
yeah,
that's incredible.
It's one of their gifts to me for sure.